This week in journalism, we will be covering the topic of newsworthiness or news quality. Um, Specifically, we'll be looking at what makes something news because, in essence, not everything is news. There's only limited space in a newspaper, so editors and publishers are responsible for deciding what articles make it in to the news, and there's certain criteria that those articles that do make it in need to meet. The same is said for a newscast on your television. There's only 30 minutes or an hour, and you need to pick and choose which topics and which news stories belong in that time slot and are going to appeal to, and there's some criteria that news people follow. What is newsworthiness? Newsworthiness is the term that we use to describe whether or not a topic is interesting enough for people to want to know about it. Just not everything out there is news. We call it having good news judgment when a reporter knows what kinds of stories will be of interest to his or her audience. And that is a key thing, is knowing your audience, because not every audience is going to find the same news stories interesting or appealing. How do you develop good news judgment? Well, there are 9 basic elements that contribute to making a story newsworthy. The more newsworthy aspects or elements a story contains, the more newsworthy it is. So you want these elements, as many as possible of these elements, to apply to your news story. And in general, a good article contains at least 4 elements of newsworthiness. If it contains more than that, it's even better. What are the 9 basic elements of newsworthiness? Timeliness, proximity, novelty, impact, drama, prominence, conflict, human interest, and usefulness. We will take a look at each one of these now separately. Timeliness. We determine if a story is timely by considering if the story is relevant now, but will not be as meaningful in a few days, weeks, or months. Hard news stories emphasize timeliness. If the story is timely, it means that it's something that's happening now and is very quickly not going to be important anymore. Maybe because it could change, or even just because it's like maybe even a human interest type of thing. Here's an example of timeliness. If this house fire happened this morning, the story is timely. If it happened 5 months ago, it is not. Unless there were to be a new development, then it would be timely. But simply stating that was a house fire, only if it happened this morning is it considered timely. The second is proximity. In general, people are more interested in things that are happening near them than those that are happening far away. We call this element of newsworthiness proximity. For people to care about issues that are happening far away from them, those issues have to be very large or have to affect them in some meaningful way. An example about proximity: a story about middle school and high school students at Northern Lebanon School District sewing quilts to donate to the Quilts of Valor project will resonate more with students than a story about a lady in Mississippi who makes quilts for sick children. The first story has proximity. It's here, it's our students, it's about us. The second story, although it's interesting that she spends her time doing that, it doesn't have proximity, so many of our readers might not be interested. Novelty is another one of the newsworthy elements. How new and exciting is the information you want to report? If a story is old and predictable, we consider it to lack a novelty. Sometimes topics grow old, but something new happens that makes them newsworthy again. It's the reporter's job to find an angle that makes the story fresh so it still contains some novelty. If you remember, the day after Captain Leslie Sully Sullenberger made an emergency landing of a U.S. Airways plane in the Hudson River in New York, everyone knew the basic facts. The plane hit a flock of birds during takeoff, both engines blew out, the captain had no choice but to land, everyone made it to safety. The novelty very quickly wore off because we knew the facts. However, the topic was still interesting, so stories that happened later had to focus on the crew and the experiences of the rescue workers in order to keep that novelty. Impact. The term impact refers to how many people are affected by the issues covered in the story. The way we say a story has higher impact if the topic is relevant to a large percentage of the audience or the population that the news is reaching. For example, some keystone exams in Algebra 1, Literature, and Biology must be passed to graduate. Or you have the story, the V3 Academy will offer additional electives during the 2013-2014 school year. Well, the audience for these two stories is very different. Every student at Northern Lebanon High School is going to have to take the keystone exams, so the entire student body is affected by these changes. By contrast, only a small number of students are enrolled in the V3 Academy full-time. So, although both stories are interesting and do have impact on our school community, the Keystone Exam article is going to have more impact. Drama. Stories with mystery, suspense, or heightened emotion are considered to be more dramatic than stories that lack this feature. So, two stories here. One about a manhunt that proceeded the day, throughout the day in search of a guy who shot and killed his wife, and then eventually was shot and killed himself, versus a story about Northern Lebanon High School students attending the 2013 snowball. Well, this story about the snowball is great. It's great that we had this event and that students went, but the manhunt story has a lot more drama and therefore is going to be a little bit more newsworthy. We could really run the snowball story pretty much within any time within a week even of the event happening. Prominence is another newsworthy quality. If you ever find yourself wondering why on earth the news would ever bother to cover Lindsay Lohan's latest breakdown, well, the answer is prominence. Celebrities, politicians, and well-known or highly ranking business people and officials are considered prominent and so worthy of news coverage. So this is why we care what Nicki Minaj was wearing on American Idol last night, because she has prominence. However, if prominence is the only newsworthy quality to a story, it is likely not a good story to run. There should be some other news quality that it would have. People that have prominence that we cover stories about. George Bush, Brangelina, Hillary Clinton, Sarah Palin, local celebrities, John and Kate from their show John and Kate +8. Another quality would be conflict. Everyone loves a fight. Sports and political stories almost always have elements of conflict. Interpersonal conflict also figures into many feature stories. Topics of human versus human versus nature, human versus machine are other staples of the conflict category. Some example, a man who's boxing a kangaroo, two nations who are at war, the whole idea of man versus nature and these survivals, man versus woman, these, gender wars, if you say, and even man versus machine. Obviously an example from Terminator, but there's plenty of other options out there as well. Human interest. Stories about unusual and interesting people, even if they aren't very prominent, can be compelling to readers. Feature stories often emphasize human interest. The Lebanon Daily ran a recurring feature for a while that was about people within Lebanon County, and I think they recently profiled Lebanon Levi from Amish Mafia. So just to kind of give you a take on people who has some prominence, but is also a local celebrity. It's important to remember with human interest that everyone has a story. The key is for the reporter to find it and convey it effectively. When writing a profile, the key information must come from those who know the person, not the person him or herself. That adds significant credibility to the article. So although you want to interview the actual topic person, you also want to interview their friends and family and get a various perspective on them. And we'll talk more about that when we do profiles and feature writing later this semester. Some examples of humanist interest stories. NLMS teacher Denise Williams is a 2012 PA Teacher of the Year finalist. Based on that information, you may want to interview her about how she became a teacher and why and all of those things. Art professor Lucas Kelly uses himself as a canvas. He's obviously tattooed. Amy Tran, NLHS graduate and field hockey Olympian, announces her retirement. Again, that has human interest and a bunch of other qualities about it as well. Articles also have to have usefulness. An article in a newspaper cannot teach you how to land a plane or play Stairway to Heaven on the guitar, but it can provide useful information that can provide meaningful assistance to the audience. So what kind of things are useful? Well, a map of our campus or a map of the local town, a how-to guide for signing up for spring classes or registering, how to ready your home for a storm, how to avoid getting speeding tickets. These are useful pieces of information that can be part of larger articles or even standalone pieces. Some examples: how to get rid of a tattoo. So it explains, what they have to do to get rid of tattoos. Santana's Changeup, a study in stealth, so it teaches you, how to throw a pitch like him. Making a cheese toastie, so directions for making this type of sandwich would all be considered useful articles. So how do I find a newsworthy topic to cover? Well, throughout the year or the semester, you are going to have to write me some news stories. So here's some things you want to consider. Not only does the news story have these qualities once you determine a topic, but how can I find some topics that might be newsworthy? Well, you want to be on the lookout for conflict or interesting events. When you see an event in progress, get your notebook out and start reporting. Look at bulletin boards and calendars posted and online throughout our school to find out what is happening so you can plan to attend an event. And sometimes that might be important. You can also be listening to what your classmates are saying about things they've seen. They may offer you a good topic to cover. So you want to be very aware of what's going on around you throughout this unit or throughout this semester so that you can have some ideas for stories when you're going to be required to write. So that is the end of the presentation today on newsworthy and newsworthy qualities. There is an assignment that goes along with this presentation that asks you to look at four recent news articles and determine which qualities they each possess that made them newsworthy. If you have any questions about this week's information or any of the assignments, please contact me and I'll be more than happy to help you. Have a good week.